Hey everybody, it's Dave, and welcome to April 19th, 2020, which means we're in COVID-19 quarantine, and I've been doing a lot of gardening, and I've been posting a lot about these different watering systems that I have, and every time I put it in like an Instagram story, I get a ton of questions about it, so I thought I would just go ahead and show you what we're doing here. I have two very different systems that have the same basic objective, is to let the plant decide how much water it wants, so making water available to the plant, and then creating a system that allows the plant to just sort of pull as much water as it wants at any given time. And then also, I don't have to worry about it. If I was going to go anywhere, not that I'm going anywhere because we're all in lockdown. I was supposed to be going to Mexico, though, for 10 days to go surfing in like 2 weeks. And that's not going to happen. But I set all this up before I knew I was going to be trapped at home. And the idea was, let's create a system where we can grow some awesome peppers and tomatoes and brocolini and some other stuff I'll show you, and not have to worry about it when we're gone. So, great plan. Didn't happen, but I want to show you these systems anyway because I get a ton of questions about them. So, let me get a little closer, and then we can take a look at them. All right, so let's dive in here a little closer and take a look. There's really two kinds of systems. One is one like this, and you can see I've got an empty one here, which is kind of today's project, really. And then these are all peppers that are growing in this system. What this is essentially a reservoir system. So what happens here, and I'll just show you on the empty one. If I take that guy off, you can see down below there's a hole. And that hole just leads to a reservoir, which is sort of this part down here. You just fill that with water, and then use this stuff called capillary matting. And this is capillary matting. And it's just a wicking material. It's pretty simple. You kind of roll it up into a little wick. And I'll show you on this tomato, or this pepper rather. It just creates like a little wick that goes down into the water, and the plant can just draw as much water as it wants from the reservoir, and then all you got to do is fill it up. And that's probably needs a little bit of water in there. That's a little bit low, not bad though. These guys are pretty thirsty. So that system is here. I also have a very similar thing, just a different sort of a little bit larger setup for these tomatoes, which is how I started all these tomatoes. There's 4 other tomato plants along that line over there. These guys are okay where they're at. They're determinants. This is an early girl, and this one's a Roma, and they're fine. When I had all the other tomatoes in there, we had a huge windstorm about 2 weeks ago, kind of early April rather, and one of them blew over. I had to take them all down. They were just a little top heavy because they were getting so big, and the root structures were really, I mean, you can see this piece of matting isn't from those, but you can see how the matting has roots in it. That's because they're actually going to root down into the water, and they'll track that matting down into the water reservoir below, which you can see just kind of fill up right there. So that's kind of one system, and these guys will be fine here because they're not going to get much bigger than this. They're determinants, as I said. The indeterminants I have a little bit different setup for. These, as you can see, well, first of all, they're in these cloth grow bags. So not plastic pots. They don't last as long as plastic pots, but they don't last as long as plastic pots, which means they're not going to be on the planet for the next, 1,000 years. So I feel a little bit better about that. The other thing they do is, and this is the first time I've ever used these, I should say that, but the one thing that they do that I've heard really good things about is that as the root structures start to grow towards the edge of the bag, they self-prune themselves. So they basically just kind of go and they push up against some air structure and stop growing. So you don't end up with that root-bound situation that you have with plastic pots. We use 10-gallon. These are 10-gallon bags. We used 10-gallon pots last year, and when we emptied them out, they were really root-bound, and we had kind of dry end rot issues, all kinds of issues, really. That's why I went to just a totally different setup this year. So for watering these, self-watering these, here's what I have. I have a 10-gallon bucket that has water in it. Then that has little, you can see the tubing that comes out of them, and it goes to these little valves. So basically what these valves do is regulate that water level. So I can tweak this a little bit, but there's not very much water. I know it might look like there's a lot of water. There's maybe it's a half an inch there. But as the plant gets thirsty and pulls that water from that source, which again, they were sort of born doing because they grew up in here and they rooted down into these reservoirs. So they're used to drinking from the bottom. As it drinks that water, this valve controls that level and it'll just replenish that level. So I just set this up yesterday. I'm not sure how long that 10 gallons is going to last. It'll probably depend on how thirsty these guys are. This one is actually a tomatillo, and I'm expecting it to get really big. It didn't have a super well-defined root structure, but I'm expecting it to get really, really large from what I've read about the tomatillos. So that's kind of the system. So as I mentioned today, a little project for today is to put this one into operation with these guys, which are 4 broccolini, some sort of a volunteer. It's probably a spaghetti squash. We've had the last couple of years just spaghetti squash volunteers. And then these other ones are supposed to be fennel, but they haven't sprout. So I'm not really sure those are going to do anything. I'm not going to bother with them for now. For now, I'm just going to tackle the broccolini. And I'm just going to take this broccolini and just put it in this basic setup, same as the peppers right above it. And then, again, use this capillary matting and just kind of, round it up in a ball and put the capillary matting near the root structure. Let the roots grow into it, and then they'll just naturally kind of suck water up. These are actually really cool, too. This is part of, these are 2 different things are kind of part of the same system, actually. This one, you can see it has a little hole here. And what that little hole is for one of those red valves to actually connect to a self-watering bucket. So you could, with a system like this, if you had it set up and attached again to a big reservoir bucket, I think you're talking about a couple of weeks of not having to water. I haven't put any water in this for quite a while. I've had a little bit of rain, but not a lot. So I think you're looking at a couple of weeks of water capacity if you had this type of a bucket set up with one of these reservoir deals. So yeah, pretty stoked for, mid to late April to have this kind of crop already is great. We've got just a lot of tomatoes kind of starting out. These are the early girls, which are just kind of starting to get going. There's the Romas. You can kind of see those. It's a little bit dark. Tomatillo's got a ton of fruit on it. The tomatillo's just got a boatload of fruit on it. And then these are the other ones, the larger ones that I was talking about. This is the one that blew over. You can see this guy was just getting massive, and I trimmed it quite a bit after it blew over. It was really, I was super bummed when that happened because it was probably the healthiest of all of them. And so it was pretty clear it was time to move to a larger, more stable situation. This guy's doing pretty good too. So, and this one was another one that almost blew over. I kind of came out. Luckily, my son saw the first one fall, and so we were able to snag that one before it really blew over. But it was kind of hairy, the whole windstorm thing. Anyway, yeah, that's my little garden setup. Oh, and a lot of people have asked me, why not just plant them directly in the soil? I've struggled with this for a couple of years. We've lived in this house now. This is our 3rd year here. And the soil doesn't drain right. I have all kinds of issues with bugs. It's just been a nonstop struggle. I've done a lot to try and improve the drainage with 0 results. So just went to the full-on containers this year. Seems a little bit easier, certainly a lot more portable system. We're going to be moving in another year, and who knows what that yard's going to look like. So if I can put them in the ground, I'll put them in the ground. If not, I got a system. So I also have another one of these little systems set up over here. Same deal, same reservoir as I was showing you earlier with the peppers. It's just got a bunch of thyme there. Then this fennel, which is just going bananas. Look at this thing. That is growing straight out of this pot. And Italian parsley, and they'd love this setup too. It's really super versatile and works really well for just about anything. So that's it. That's the yard setup. That's the self-watering systems that we have in place for these guys. Let me know if you have questions about any of that, or I know one question I'm going to be is where you get all this stuff. And I forgot to mention, I actually inherited all this stuff. My good friend John lived in Ireland for several years, and that's where he kind of collected a lot of this stuff. Some of that makes it challenging because the tubing is kind of a funky size that I'm having to order online and having trouble finding. But these systems are readily available, and quite honestly, you could easily make your own. These DIY setups, the system that I showed you for the plants is a total DIY setup. I drilled the hole in that pan, set it all up myself, and you could easily do that with these. You just need a reservoir of some sort, a bucket, would work. I've seen people use kiddie pools. A bucket would work, a way to set them on top, and the capillary matting, which I bought on Amazon for like $30, and it was more than enough to cover everything you see here. So anyway, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll keep you up to date, and we'll see how the harvest goes. I'm super excited about it. All right, later.